Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked, where I climb the online series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today I wanted to try out a really fun team featuring 3 duos that I think are very strong in the format at the moment, including Choice Scarf Kyogre plus Seismitoad, Mimikyu plus Weakness Policy Calyrex, and the classic Torkoal plus Venusaur combination. So, as always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps linked in the description below. And huge thank you to trainer Red VGC for the team. He was the original creator, so I've linked his Twitter down as well as Twitch down in the description below. So please go check him out, and Red Twin Paste are also down in the description below, courtesy of Red. So, talking about this team. Seismitoad is a Pokemon that, of course, I was drawn to, and we actually featured a decent amount in Series 11. It first started with Special Seismitoad, and then I actually ran into that Physical Seismitoad team, lost against it, and then also featured it on the channel. And so Seismitoad's a really interesting Pokemon because it has a very favorable matchup against a lot of common non-restricted Pokemon, right? So Pokemon like Incineroar, Landorus, for example, Regieleki. And Seismitoad also does pretty well into a lot of common restricted Pokemon, right? Zacian, for example, you can just threaten with the one-hit KO with Life Orb Max Quake. Max Geyser is really powerful into, say, Groudon. Max Overgrowth or Power Whips are really strong to Kyogre. And so, yeah, Seismitoad generally has really good type coverage, and this is indeed a physical set. The physical set allows you to run Bounce. That's the only flying type attack in its moveset, allowing you to go for max Airstream, not only doing good damage into things like Amoonguss, but also boosting your speed as well as your partner's speed. So, supported next to a Choice Scarf Kyogre here. Pretty standard set for the most part. And as always with Scarf Kyogre, the main thing you want to watch out for is Regieleki, because you outspeed pretty much everything outside of Regieleki in the format. Moving on to the next duo, we've got Mimikyu plus Calyrex Ice Rider here, and so this is a duo we've used a lot of throughout the last couple of formats, very classic. Whole idea is to set up Trick Room and then activate Weakness Policy on Calyrex and really just sweep from there. Key thing to note here is that Calyrex actually has that Heavy Slam rather than something like Trick Room, and so that kind of coverage can be really valuable, especially into like opposing Calyrexes, and getting defense boosts are always valuable given how many common physical Pokemon there are in the format. Finally, you've got Torkoal plus Venusaur, and this is also a combo that we've used a lot of, but, you know, the thing about Torkoal and Venusaur is that there are plenty of different ways to run it. So, since you have Life Orb already committed on Seismitoad, Focus Sash is here on Venusaur, which I really like because the Venusaur is actually pretty strong as a non-Dynamax option on this team as well if you want to end up maxing like Seismitoad or Calyrex. And then Torkoal here does actually have Yawn despite it being Charcoal plus Eruption, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Charcoal plus Eruption is just so powerful if you get Trick Room up. So one, combo you can go with this Mimikyu, Calyrex, Torkoal, and just aim towards setting up Trick Room, right? I think, for example, with that, you can either lead Venusaur or more likely, I think, Kyogre with Mimikyu, pressure them with damage, and then also set up Trick Room and then just sweep from there. So, yeah. Ultimately, none of these duos are really anything super surprising, but I really like how they, match up. And I think from, the opponent's perspective, it's really hard to cover for all 3 combinations, right? On one hand, you have 2 really fast-paced duos with Kyogre, Seismitoad, and then Venusaur and Sun. But on the other hand, you also have to cover for the Trick Room mode of Mimikyu, Calyrex, and Torkoal. And it's very difficult in Team Preview to have a lead matchup that can cover for all 3 of these combinations. And so, yeah, overall, I'm looking forward to just trying out Seismitoad a little bit more in Series 12, as well as trying out Kyogre plus Calyrex. Kyogre, of course, one of the best restricted Pokemon at the moment. I think Calyrex also very powerful, but the key thing about using Calyrex is you do have to be very careful about, Zacian, right? I know you basically have to get Trick Room up or burn the Zacian to feel comfortable using Calyrex. And then the last thing I'll call out here is that Venusaur does have that Weather Ball, so Weather Ball in the Sun turns into Max Flare if you Dynamax Venusaur, and that can deal massive amounts of damage, if not get a one-hit KO onto Zacian. So, yeah. Thanks once again to Trainer Red VGC for the team. So let's get into today's episode. Thank you so much as always for watching. If you enjoyed, please share your support by leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, I'm curious what restricted duo that you've tried out that you think people might be sleeping on at the moment. I personally haven't ventured too far into some of the more obscure duos, so I actually don't really have a super good answer to this right now. So curious to see what you all think. But let's get started. Alright, getting into things here, and they've got Kyogre, Zacian, Regieleki, Landorus, Grimmsnarl, and Incineroar. So I feel like this can be a really good Seismitoad game. The only downside is that they have 2 Intimidators, but I'm hoping we scare away the Intimidators here, thanks to Kyogre and Seismitoad. So I don't mind a Seismitoad lead here. We don't have Fake Out, so I can't really deny Grimmsnarl from setting up screens potentially, but hopefully they go for like one of Light Screen or Reflect, and then we just KO them so they can't set up the other. I mean, Torkoal and Venu aren't terrible here either, honestly. I'm not opposed to Seismitoad Kyogre as the lead, and then I don't know, I think Mimikyu and Calyrex in the back can be pretty strong here. Just go with like 2 of the main modes of the team. Because the idea here is that Mimikyu and Calyrex can clean up the game. Like we use the early game and just like pressure them with very fast Pokemon, and then set up a Trick Room in the late game, and then Calyrex can just clean things up. But I think Torkoal and Venu is a really strong duo here as well, so we have the classic problem where like all of the Pokemon we have are pretty good, I just don't know which really are the best. Okay, they're going to go with Zacian and Grimmsnarl. So the good thing is that you can't Thunder Wave the Seismitoad, but you might have Scary Face. I would think Zacian here feels threatened, and so maybe thinks about switching out. They don't really have great water switch-ins. So I'm actually pretty down to just Dynamax, go for a Quake onto Zacian, and just a Water Spout. I guess the problem with this play is that it feels pretty obvious. I don't see too much downside to going for this, though, and giving Kyogre a special defense boost is always valuable, considering they have a Regieleki on their side. It's going to be Grimmsnarl switching out into Landorus. Regardless of what Zacian does here, this is an amazing turn 1, in my opinion, because, like, I still get a Quake off here, and you're eating up a Water Spout. So I'm really surprised. I thought, if anything, the switch would go the other way. By the way, like, one thing to consider there is, like, they could have switched in Landorus into the Max Quake, and so that's a reason to consider Geysering. But in my eyes, I was like, well, if you're switching in Zacian into Landorus and staying out with Grimmsnarl, that means I just get a Water Spout off. And even if the Seismitoad doesn't get an attack off, it's really good against everything else, right? So, yeah, I'm surprised by that. The other interesting thing is I think people now realize that Seismitoad does lean a little bit more towards physical than special, but yeah, I mean, Kyogre here is Choice Scarfed. So we're gonna get a special defense boost on both of these Pokemon. And yeah, we're just gonna get Water Spout off. I think that's just game over on turn 1, honestly. And that's the beauty of Seismitoad. It can really push the tempo with this team. I was playing just a couple of practice games to learn the team beforehand, and I think one of the things about one of the things that makes playing this team a little bit tricky is identifying when to play with Seismitoad. And the other thing is that you have like a really interesting mix of really fast and slow Pokemon, right? So it's like it can be kind of counterintuitive if you set up Trick Room early, but then you've got like Kyogre in the back, for example. But this is an example of a game where my opponent just had 0 options into Seismitoad. Like there is literally nothing on their team that even threatens Seismitoad for a ton of damage other than like Max Geyser from Kyogre, Max Airstream from Landorus, maybe a Play Rough from Zacian. And so this is also why like grass type attacks are getting increasingly common, it feels like, because I think people realize that Seismitoad and Gastrodon are very strong in the early format here. So let's just not throw the game. We still got Mimikyu and Calyrex in the back. We can essentially guarantee a knockout onto the Grimmsnarl here. I'm just going to go for Geyser here, and then a Water Spout as well. We can still lose this game. Like, Kyogre is a bulky enough Pokemon where, even though that was like the best possible turn one I could have asked for, never want to get too greedy and just want to make sure we don't mess anything up. So the interesting thing about them Dynamaxing here with Kyogre is that it actually only limits them to targeting 1 Pokemon at a time. And that can actually be kind of tough for my opponent, because you're only targeting 1 Pokemon at a time. Well, you only have so many turns with Dynamax with Kyogre, and Mimikyu is disguised in the back. So then what I can angle to go for is just set up Trick Room with Mimikyu, activate that policy on Calyrex, and then really go from there. Okay, they do indeed have that Scary Face, so I think that is definitely a strong play. Yep, slow down the Kyogre and then try to just one-shot it with maybe a Max Lightning. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think with the Reflect, Grimm should survive Geyser here. Yeah. Or not the Reflect, sorry, the Intimidate from earlier. Oh, interesting, though. They just end up Geysering. Okay. So that probably indicates they don't have Max Lightning, and that did way too little damage, actually. I'm really surprised at how little that did. It's because we have the special defense boost from Max Quake, right? So yeah, I think this is just an example of how good Seismitoad can be in this format. So if your opponent doesn't have Rillaboom, your life is already like 10 times easier. Rillaboom's going to be the main counter to both Kyogre and Seismitoad that you have to be very careful about. So now I can just Overgrowth. Probably would have been more optimal to actually switch out my Kyogre just because I've got Thunder on it, but I don't really think it makes a difference at this point. This was just pure Seismitoad domination, so yeah. I think there's really not too much my opponent could do given the lead matchup that they had. Your best bet in a best of 3, I think, would be to lead the Grimmsnarl and then maybe the Kyogre, and then angle for like a scary face into Seismitoad right into a Max Geyser. But the problem here is that they take so much damage from Seismitoad, and they also don't really deal much to it either. So it's just a perfect situation for Seismitoad to thrive. And at this point, I mean, using Seismitoad isn't even that wild. We actually featured it a lot back in Series 11. I wouldn't say a lot, but at least, 2 times. And the first time I played against physical Seismitoad, I remember I was completely caught off guard by it, just because it's not a set that I ever really thought about. But I think you'll find that in Series 12, more players actually like to use physical than special, at least just anecdotally. So, yeah. Anyway, there's really not much Kyogre can do from this position, and this is the it reveals one of the downsides of a Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, right? It can be very strong in terms of setting up its partners for success, but it's never going to really deal very much damage, and so it really falls off when, the Pokemon next to it also really doesn't threaten with knockouts immediately. And part of the other tricky thing about Grimmsnarl is that your opponent can take advantage of the fact that you normally don't really carry Protect, and so you can double up into that slot with more confidence than into a lot of the other Pokemon in the format. So yeah, I think this was exactly a game to highlight why you might want to consider using Seismitoad in the format. Just like Series 11, has a very favorable matchup into a lot of the common Pokemon that you're going to run into. Pokemon like Landorus, like Incineroar, for example, like Regieleki, has a really good matchup against a lot of the restricted Pokemon, and also has a very favorable matchup in Zacian, which, of course, is by far the most common restricted Pokemon. So if you want to beat Seismitoad, then a Grass-type attack is typically the best way, and that's, Pokemon like Rillaboom or Ferrothorn, for example. And so, yeah, fun way to get things started, and let's just keep things going. Next match of the day here, and we've got Zacian plus Groudon. Now, they do have a Ferrothorn here, and you can see, right, if they don't have Ferrothorn, I don't see how they deal with Seismitoad at all, but the Ferrothorn alone is going to be a pretty big problem for us. I think what's really fun about using this team is you have so many strong duos and so many strong options, right? Like 3 different pairs that all synergize really well with each other. But the tricky thing is figuring out which pair to drop. This feels like it can be a really good Venusaur game, but my main hesitance about it is going to be dealing with that Charizard from my opponent's side. Regieleki plus Charizard, I think, is a really strong lead that I've run up against while practicing with this team. And it's a tricky one. The other question is whether or not Charizard has max overgrowth. This might be a weird, but I might actually drop Calyrex in this one as well. Because I don't think it's a fantastic max option. Because I think they're almost always maxing Charizard. Okay, this might seem kind of weird, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to go with Venusaur plus Seismitoad, Kyogre, and Torkoal in the back. And the idea is I can flex either weather user on turn 1 of the game as a switch in. I don't know. I think, if they didn't have Ferrothorn, I would probably angle towards setting up Trick Room, but the problem is Regieleki plus Charizard's so strong because you can Volt Switch into Mimikyu, go out into Groudon, and then just G-Max Wildfire. And that's a lead that I struggled a little bit against when I played against it, and so I'm trying to, maybe cover for that here. But they actually go with Ferrothorn and Charizard. Okay, that works okay, I think. Turn 1 is so interesting here because I have... you know what the problem is, though? If I switch into Kyogre right now, the Ferrothorn will switch after me. Because it's slower. Meaning, you can guarantee the sun up for if you're in my opponent's shoes right now. Because the other thing is I've got Weather Ball, so part of me wants to just eliminate Ferrothorn and get rid of it to start the game. Okay, I'm not opposed to a Sleep Powder here on Charizard. Actually, I think this always works. Switching out into Torkoal and Sleep Powdering feels fine to me. The only thing is then it's dependent on hitting Sleep Powder. If I miss here, it actually puts us in a really terrible position. And there's also a chance they're Lummet or Safety Goggles. Okay, they don't switch. They're not Lum. They're not Safety Goggles, so I'll gladly take that. See if they just went for Power Whip here. That turn was really interesting as well because they were basically willing... Yeah, they have Power Whip. Cool. Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more Ferrothorn in early Series 12 right now. Okay, Solar Power. I mean, this is why Venusaur is such an effective Pokemon, right? But it is really nerve-wracking just leading it the way I did. I actually don't have super good damage output into Charizard right now, but they also probably don't want to Dynamax. What are their switch-ins right now? I would think Ferrothorn's just going to opt to Protect. I'm going to bait them into thinking I can't threaten Ferrothorn with the KO and go for Earth Power right now into Eruption. I think Ferro probably protects here. Oh, they switch. Okay. Into Groudon. Cool, that works well for us. I guess the thing is if Charizard wakes up here, though, right, they just get a big attack off and deny me this Eruption. But they stay asleep, so... Yeah, I mean, this game was really weird because I hate relying on Sleep Powder, but I think it was just by far my most consistent line of action to take in this in-game. Okay, so they take more damage from that. Gosh, I mean, I don't think I KO here, actually. Like, I really want to G-Max Vine Lash at this point, actually, right? The key thing to note is that they do have Ferrothorn in the back, so Ferro is going to be pretty good against both of these Pokemon. I still have Speed Charizard, but I don't have Sludge Bomb. If I did, this would be basically a wrap, I feel like. I could also Max Flare the Charizard. That seems questionable. I don't know about this play. I'm conserving the Torkoal because it's my best answer into Ferrothorn, but I think here Groudon protects and you just try to wake up with the Charizard. You could also say, hey, I'm basically have lost the game if I don't max... Okay, they don't bother maxing. The Earth Power here was just to make sure they don't get a Swords Dance or Precipice Blades off. Okay, they do manage to wake up, and it's going to be Scorching Sands, actually. Oh. Cool, I'll take that. They do get a burn, unfortunately, but I really can't complain about something like that, given how good the game has started for us, right? I think without that burn, we'd be in such a commanding position, but I still really can't complain. So I'm going to Weather Ball in this position, target the Charizard, and just go for a Stomping Tantrum here onto Groudon. I do have to, unfortunately, reveal Weather Ball, but that's okay. I'm actually going to give up both Pokemon here, it looks like. If that's the case, then I just max the Venusaur and we just win the game. So, yeah. Cool. I do think, like, this game felt very reliant on sleep, because if I miss the Sleep Powder, turn 1 can be really tricky to begin with, and if the Charizard wakes up on turn 2 and gets the Scorching Sands off into the Torkoal, then I do substantially less damage into the Groudon. So, I don't know if it was, like, an absolutely well-played game on my end, but... That's the thing about Venusaur, right? Like, it can bail you out of so many of these situations, even when it feels like you don't have very consistent answers. And that's the beauty of it. So, we're going to bring in Ferrothorn as well as the Zacian. No surprise there. Let's just double check how much weather we have left. We still have the Focus Sash on Venu, by the way, as well. It's the last turn of Sunlight, so... I don't really need Seismitoad at this point in the game. I am just going to Dynamax. I'm going to go for the Flare here onto the Zacian and double up into it. Seismitoad is useless for me at this point in the game. The idea of leading it was to pressure the... Oh, you know what's also really interesting? My opponent doesn't have a Dynamax option anymore at this point in the game. So I think like the Ferrothorn switch out earlier makes sense. I think my opponent was probably just saying, okay, well, I'm already behind in this game, and if I can get Groudon out, just like angle for a Swords Dance and like manage to wake up early with Charizard, that can be really good. But in my eyes, I think it was better for them to just sacrifice Ferrothorn to get a free switch into the... Zacian or the Groudon. Because the problem is, like, a late game Ferrothorn doesn't really do anything for my opponent, right? Especially because I've got the Weather Ball combination here. Okay. So, they're going to max Ferrothorn, but max Ferrothorn is very underwhelming here, to be honest. You just have no damage into Venusaur. Zacian goes for an obvious Protect, but that's fine. I mean, if you're overgrowthing into the Seismitoad, we sacrifice that and then just bring in the... Torkoal, right? And then just go from there. Okay. Chip at it through Protect. Stomping is wasted, but that's fine. Really don't need to bother targeting the Ferrothorn slot here. And they just go for Max Knuckle. Okay. So that's actually interesting though, right? Because, well, if your Max Knuckle is probably coming from Body Press, I guess. So Body Press plus Power Whip. This is, by the way, exactly why I wanted to conserve the Torkoal. Because it allows me to just set up the Sun again, right? And... the Venusaur and Sun actually solos wins against 3 of the 4 Pokemon my opponent had in this matchup. So now I can just strike into Zacian and then switch back out into Torkoal. So the question is, like, how can I play this game without relying on Sleep Powder? Because the thing is, the first turn of this match was tricky because I think I have to cover for my opponent switching Ferrothorn out into into Groudon. Because the play I wanted to make was, oh yeah, why don't I just switch into Kyogre and then just try to one-shot the Charizard immediately? And you could see my opponent hedged for that by staying in with Ferrothorn and going for a Power Whip there. So it's weird to see a Venusaur dunking on my opponent's team given that they had a Charizard, but that's where Sleep Powder can really bail us. And that's also why, like, some players will run Safety Goggles or Lumberry on Charizard just to ensure that you absolutely demolish Venusaur. Because imagine if they have a Lum or a Goggles there, you just ignore my Sleep Powder, you can Wildfire Venusaur, one-shot Venusaur, and if you knock out Venusaur in this matchup, I don't really have good damage into the rest of your Pokemon, right? And so, like, that's why turn 1's a little bit scary, because even though, once again, it worked out well for us, I'm not sure it's a play that always works out, and I think, like, you know, some players in team building can just stop that immediately. But this was the beauty of Max Flare and the Venusaur, or Weather Ball turning into Max Flare. So, you know, isn't any brand new concept, but I think what's really fun about this team is, from your opponent's perspective, it's really hard to cover for, like, both ends of the weather spectrum, right? On one end, you want to deal with the Kyogre and the Seismitoad. On the other hand, it's hard to cover for that as well as the Venusaur and Torkoal combination. The other interesting thing here is, like, could I have actually slotted in Mimikyu and Calyrex Ice Rider? Because my opponent in this one led with Ferrothorn and the Charizard. So Mimikyu could actually work there, but the thing is then I have to deal with Ferrothorn under Trick Room, and I really didn't want to bother with an Iron Defense Body Press set, although I suppose I have Torkoal to potentially deal with that. So yeah, either way though, like, this is why Venusaur can be so good, right? But I like would not advise to click Sleep Powder on turn 1 unless you feel like you don't have a substantially better option, and I really didn't feel like I had like a really good play on turn 1 outside of that. And Sleep Powder there could punish them really heavily, especially if they click Dynamax on turn 1. And I actually think in this game, my opponent probably would have been better off just actually clicking Dynamax with Charizard. Because even though Charizard had taken so much damage at that point already, like, Zacian and Ferrothorn are never really going to Dynamax, and then Groudon can't really Dynamax comfortably after taking 90% of its health on turn 2 of the game. And so I think in this game, you need to just max Charizard and hope that you wake up sooner than later, because my opponent essentially just didn't get a Dynamax to play with in this game. So, yeah. Either way, though, let's just keep things going here. Alright, third one of the day here, and it is Zacian Kyogre. A duel as classic as it gets here. Man, I haven't really given Mimikyu or Calyrex much of a time, like, opportunity to shine here. It could be okay. It doesn't, like, hard win immediately for us, though. I'm more intrigued by Dual Weather again. My fear is Scarf Ogre plus Zacian lead, right? Although I don't think they're going to lead Kyogre. Zapdos, I think, is a really strong lead option from their end, which is why I actually want to try out Calyrex. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Mimikyu Kyogre. So we essentially use Kyogre as, like, early offensive pressure, right? And say, well, you got to deal with the Kyogre some way. I don't know, though. Some Seismitoad can be really good here as well. But I think Calyrex under Trick Room looks really nice here. Especially because if I were in my opponent's shoes, I would actually probably try to play towards the Zapdos. But we have so many options here that I'm not sure, you know, I've gone with the 100% like best option. But the reason I don't love Venusaur here is because of that Zapdos, especially if they have Safety Goggles, and they lead it. So, yep, that's exactly what my fear was. Okay, we got Drizzle off first, so they could be Choice Scarf. Can't confirm that yet. We are Timid Max Speed. But, like, the angle I was thinking about here was actually just going for a Trick Room, and actually, instead of Water Spouting, I could Thunder the Kyogre instead. Because then it can just be at max Quake KO range. I'm like a little bit nervous about Weakness Policy Kyogre though. I think the odds of it are really slim, but it would be a disaster if they were Weakness Policy and then they like Hurricane into Mimikyu and then just Geyser it for a knockout as well. Okay, they max Kyogre. Given this, I think it's likely my opponent's doubling up on Mimikyu to just deny me Trick Room on turn 1, but that's honestly okay because... And then I just get a free switch in. The best case here is... Oh my gosh, we almost one-shot Zapdos. Yeah, they're going to go for Hurricane. Okay, smart play. This is where it would have been really interesting if I actually just brought Venusaur in the back instead, because then I could just Dynamax it. Okay, they're Life Orb, so we actually just eliminate Zapdos on turn 1 of the game. Works well for us. And there's Max Geyser. Yep, that's not really surprising. See if this KOs Mimikyu. I would expect it to. Yep. Yeah, the slight downside of not having like an Incineroar or an NDD is that I don't have super safe ways to get Trick Room up. So, man, yeah, if I actually had Venusaur here, I feel like we would actually almost win the game. Because they could bring out Zacian, I would bring out Venu, Max Venu, and then just switch into Torkoal and Max Flare. Although I suppose then they could just protect. So, yeah. Man, figuring out who to Dynamax here is a doozy. Like, I don't think I want to bring Torkoal out because it reduces my damage output. What are they bringing? I would think Zacian, but it's Urshifu. Okay, and it's Dark Urshifu as well. Dark Urshifu, I'm Weakness Policy'd. They're going to have Zacian in the back, but I've got Torkoal in the back from my end. Like, I'm leaning towards just Max Quaking here and Spouting. I think I got a Dynamax here because otherwise they just pressure me with Wicked Blow, and that's entirely too much to deal with. So Spout will bring Urshifu down to Sash. I was thinking about going for Steel Spike or Hailstorm, but I think we actually want Urshifu out on the field right now because I don't want to give them a free switch in at Zacian. Part of the problem about going up against Zacian as a Calyrex-I user here is that if we don't get Trick Room up, we have a terrible matchup against it. Okay, so they're not going to protect Urshifu there. No surprise. Yep, there is Focus Sash. That's also not surprising. There's Wicked Blow. They're going to activate my policy. We should survive a Geyser here as well. So let's see. Oh, they go for Lightning. Okay. Actually, never mind. I think that's a smart play. But they don't one-shot us. That is a really big deal in my opinion. So now I get a Quake off. But I'm not going to KO Kyogre, I don't think. Okay, but you know what? I think we're okay, because now I get a special defense boost on both Pokemon. And I have a guaranteed knockout onto that Urshifu, because I can just set up the Hail. So, like, what I can do here is just Hailstorm into Kyogre and go for Water Spout. Since they're at 1 HP, all I need is to, you know, finish them off. They could go for Sucker Punch and then Geyser, but then I would just Hailstorm. Hail would finish off Urshifu, and I think Hailstorm plus the Hail Chip should KO Kyogre. And Torkoal's going to win 1v1 against the Zacian as well, so that's why I conserved Torkoal this whole game. So I feel pretty good about my position right now. That last turn was big, because we ended up surviving, and they didn't double up to pick up a KO on either Pokemon, right? So it's like they split their damage, allowing me to get max value. Yep, they do just go for Sucker Punch, but that's fine. What I don't want to do is switch Kyogre out into Torkoal, because Torkoal is my main win condition against Zacian at this moment in the game. So if we don't get crit by Geyser here, I think we're in very good shape. Let's see. Okay, nice, no crit. And that's where that special defense boost helps guarantee us survive. And now Calyrex gets the Max Hailstorm off. Cool, and that's going to be a double KO. And now we've set ourselves up for the end game, which is Torkoal against presumably what should be their Zacian. I mean, what are the other Pokemon they even had on their team that scares me, right? Like, Grimmsnarl, that doesn't do anything. It's just got to be Zacian, right? And that's exactly why I wanted to conserve Torkoal, so it's kind of a cool way to get a double knockout in one turn here. Okay, so that's out of the way now. We still have another turn of Dynamax on Calyrex, but Calyrex is always fainting to Zacian anyway, so that doesn't really make much of a difference. Okay, bring out Torkoal. Oh, wow, they actually didn't bring Zacian. It was Incineroar. Interesting. I guess that actually gives them a slightly better shot in this endgame, though, actually, wildly enough. Because if it were Zacian, you know, you just really don't do... Well, actually, I don't think Instant really does much damage to Torkoal either. There's still 3 turns of Sunlight, so I can't really yawn very easily. I'm actually just going to Max Quake here. Like, I think there's a chance they read into Calyrex protecting and just go for Fake Out. I also don't mind them taking more recoil from Flare Blitz, and yeah, they go for the Fake Out. So, in this position, like, I don't really feel the need to protect. It feels like you should, right? Because, oh yeah, can't they just Flare Blitz us? But the thing is, even if you knock out the Calyrex, then it's just 1v1 Torkoal against the Incineroar. There'll only be 2 turns of Electric Terrain the turn after, and by not protecting, I can just Earth Power, protect, yawn, protect, and then go from there. Thanks to Yawn and thanks to Torkoal being bulky, I don't think Instinct can really win that easily 1v1, even if you're going for Snarl on Parting Shot, and because we have Yawn in the end game there. But yeah, by just going for the Quake there, we punish them for making a read. But I can certainly see why they went for it, because basically, like, I should just win the game, right, if I don't make any major mistakes. And so from there, and they're thinking, okay, my only way to get back into this game is hoping that they protect and then knocking out with Flare Blitz the subsequent turn. Because if they just Flare Blitz Calyrex there because we have Yawn, I think there's really no way out for them. So yeah, it's been a very fast couple of games though, so we'll look for one final one today. Final one here, and we're up against rank 50, and they've got a Tyranitar. Okay, that is not a Pokemon I've seen in a while, honestly, so that's really cool. T-Tar, hello. Man, this is a weird one. Part of me feels like I should just go the Trick Room out, get Policy activated on Calyrex, and sweep from there. So it would be Mimikyu, Calyrex, Torkoal likely, maybe with a Kyogre lead. Seismitoad could be really good for us here. Oh, this one hurts my head. I feel like we have so many strong options here. I really don't know what the best one is. T-Tar is also just... I'm just intrigued by that in general. The thing is that Seismitoad is so strong, they don't bring Venusaur, but surely they bring that, right? I just feel like Calyrex under Trick Room here is really good, but as always, the question is, can I get Trick Room up safely? I want to give Seismitoad a shot here, so I'm going to go Seismitoad... Venu, Torkoal, Kyogre again. This one's a little bit odd, because I think Mimikyu and Calyrex is a really good duo here, but like I mentioned, with this team, you have so many strong options, and I really don't know what the absolute best one is sometimes. And part of it is movesets, part of it is like not knowing what items my opponents are going to have. I don't love playing towards Venusaur in this game early because of that Thundurus, but it can be pretty effective late. Zacian and Venusaur, okay. I mean, if I led Mimikyu Calyrex here, or Mimikyu plus anything, like, there are a lot of things that could go wrong for us. And in this position, like, I truthfully don't mind just switching Toad out into Torkoal. And then just going for Max Flare. I guess the question here is, do I need to target Zacian? Because it's actually Venusaur I'd rather take care of. But I really don't want them to get a Behemoth Blade off on a Venusaur, so I'll target Zacian instead. Like, if I had led Mimikyu here, I also leave myself open to a turn 1 Sleep Powder from Venusaur, and if Venusaur Sleep Powders Mimikyu, it's like an absolute disaster for us if they connect. So, that's the other thing, right? It's not like I have an Incineroar or an NDD to protect the Mimikyu. I just have to lead something that scares them off. They're staying in with Zacian, so if we could just pick it off with a Flare immediately, that would be a pretty sweet start. But the funny thing here is I think Zacian's actually one of the least threatening Pokemon to go up against for us, because it's like, doesn't really do that much to Kyogre or Seismitoad. I mean, if they play rough, obviously they can still do a lot, but I'm not that scared of it. So I'm curious if they max their Venusaur. Looks like they will, which I'm fine with, especially if they're Vine Lashing into the Torkoal slot. And I feel like it should be a Vine Lash here into Seismitoad, because, like, it would be very bold to just go for a Max Flare on turn 1 of the game. That's the other question. Do you have Weather Ball? Because if not, then I win the trade-off between our Venusaurs very nicely. And even if their Zacian protects here, it's honestly not even that bad for me. They are going to protect. Okay, nicely done. The other thing here is I really don't want to activate Weakness Policy on Venusaur if they have that potentially. So we've won the speed tie, potential speed tie between Dynamax, and then I also went first here, which makes me think I am just faster. And Divine Lash. Okay. That is so much damage, though. What? Yeah, that's because you're Life Orb. Okay, that makes sense. I don't love that. Okay, that's a problem. That is going to be a problem. Got Kyogre and Seismitoad in the back. Torkoal's basically on its last legs here. Okay, I don't mind going for Max Quake here into Zacian and a Yawn onto Venusaur, because I think there's a chance the Venusaur expects Torkoal to protect or switch out. Whoa, into T-Tar? That's a fascinating play. That's exactly why I Max Quaked, by the way. Because I really didn't want to just get cheesed and not get my Weather Ball off. Or my Max, I should say, off. That's like a hard read play. Although, I mean, you do bring me down to my Focus Sash, so I don't even get Vine Lash off in this game, so this might actually still be fine for my opponent. Because actually the problem is now... Oh my gosh, I don't even KO Zacian. Sheesh. Nicely done. Nicely done. Very, very well played in this game. It does allow me to get Yawn off, though, but the problem... That's an amazing Tyranitar switch in. Like, changes the weather, so I can't knock out Zacian. I really thought we'd get the KO there with Max Quake, and if we get the knockout there, I actually think we're in really great shape still. But they're bulky enough to survive, so Tanky Zacian there. And that makes this game pretty much lost at this point, actually, I think. Because I've got Kyogre and Seismitoad in the back. Sure, that's great to switch into, but now my opponent can just give up both Pokemon and then go out into Groudon plus Venusaur. I think the one way we could maybe find a way out of this is... bounce? If I can bounce with Seismitoad and then nail the Venusaur. You would think T-Tar switches out now. I guess that's the other thing. Oh, but you know what's interesting? If you change the weather with T-Tar, you'd have to change it back. Okay. I'm down to just Water Spout and Liquidation here. That Yawn might save us. This is smart. They're just sacking T-Tar. Yeah. That is absolutely the best way to play this out. They're Sash too, so I could have like hoped that they were Sash, intentionally let them fall asleep. But then the thing is, I don't know what I'd go for with Kyogre, right? Like, do I lock myself into Ice Beam instead? Maybe that's the best bet. It's still winnable too, I would... Well, it's looking kind of shaky now actually, because you can just yeah, I needed to like let Tyranitar survive there and let them fall asleep. Zacian's bulk here also really clutching it out for my opponent, so nicely done. I think if we get the knockout with Max Quake there, we should be in a really good spot. Because I get a special defense boost. They'd have a Groudon in the back to reset the weather for us, and then suddenly you don't have really that much good damage pressure into me. So I went for the Max Quake, but unfortunately it was not enough, and so yeah, good EV investment there. They bring in Groudon now. Your play is to always protect Groudon and just sacrifice Zacian. Yeah. But if for some reason they don't protect with Groudon and give me a double knockout, we could still win. But yeah, they just protect. Yep, this is exactly how you should play it. And this is the downside of going down so many Pokemon so quickly, right? Because we both have weather that we're angling for in this game. So it's really rare to see a turn 1 Dynamax switch out, but it was smart for two reasons, right? One, it prevents the Max Flare into Zacian from just KOing them outright. They knew how much EV investments, they had on the Zacian. I obviously didn't. I just thought a Quake would KO. And two, it also set up the Sun to cover for Focus Sash Venusaur as well. So, yeah, I'm wondering how much HP and special defense investment they even have on the Zacian. I don't know if you even need a ton to survive, but now they've set themselves up perfectly where, you know, you get the weather up. I also just revealed on Choice Scarf with Kyogre, and so Venusaur can just ignore the Kyogre at this point. So it would have been interesting to lock myself into Ice Beam onto the Zacian slot, because Tyranitar would have been at 1 HP anyway, and then it would fall asleep, meaning then you only essentially have one Pokemon at a time that can attack around the Tyranitar. So I should have thought about that more. But the other thing is it's contingent on Tyranitar having a Focus Sash, but in the end they actually did have that, so yeah. One way we could win is for some reason I actually really don't see an out here, but let's see. If they went for a Sleep Powder, actually. Or Frenzy Plant, can't that miss? That can miss, right? Because it's like Blast Burn. I thought it was 90 or 95% accuracy. So we actually had a shot there. It would need to rely on Venusaur not having Protect, though, and I'd be shocked if it didn't have Protect. Yeah, they just Precipice Blades. Well, they do miss. I guess it's theoretically winnable off like a billion misses and a crit here on Groudon. You should just Protect, yeah. So I think I should have locked myself into Ice Beam in this endgame with Kyogre. We were so far behind anyway that I needed to find a big player or two. But the only reason I'm not giving up here is because I think Frenzy Plant can miss, right? I need to double check that after this game. But I do so little damage actually to Venusaur. There's really no shot here. Yeah, this one was a really interesting one because we had the Weather Wars. I mean, they led with Venu, right? Like Trick Room, Mimikyu, Calyrex could have worked here. Into Venu, Zacian's just scary though, because they could sub with Zacian, they could Sleep Powder with Venusaur, so it doesn't feel consistent enough to me. I just want to double check Frenzy Plant's accuracy real quick. So Frenzy Plant, let's see. Yeah, it is 90%. But I would think that they had Protect on the Venusaur anyway, so I don't really think we had an amazing out, but that's the funny, like we actually maybe could have if they're running Frenzy Plant, just, you know, quadruple offense, like, or, well, they're actually your Life Orb, so I think you'd have to have Protect. You probably drop Leaf, not Leaf Storm, that's Sleep Powder on that moveset actually. So I would go Frenzy Plant, Earth Power, Weather Ball / Sludge Bomb, Protect, or you drop one of those final two attacks for Sleep Powder. So yeah, nicely done by my opponent. Then it's pretty cool to see how Tyranitar can operate in this format with Focus Sash as well. Like that changed the game dramatically, right? Because it's another way to change the weather and break Focus Sash as well. So yeah, really fun set of games though, and I think this team has a lot of strong combinations. So yeah, thank you so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all next time. All right, peace.